Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of On the Way Home. I'm your host, Michael Braithwaite, and I have the deep honor of working with a brilliant team of people at Blue Door, my organization that works with most vulnerable in our communities, and those communities are York, Durham, Peel. We provide a whole array of what? So, Chris, should we redo that? They just the thing cut back in. Okay, good, because I'm screwing that up anyways. Here we go. Well, hello there, friends, and welcome to another episode of On the Way Home. I was trying something new there for the intro. It didn't work, and that's today's kind of theme is trying something new. It's innovation. But before we get to that, I'm going to introduce myself. I am your host, Michael Braithwaite. Welcome to On the Way Home. And I work at a great organization called Blue Door. And Blue Door works with our most vulnerable across York, Durham, and Peel regions to support them with housing, to support them getting healthy, to support them with meaningful and well-paying employment. All those things kind of work together to launch people into hopeful and healthy futures. And if you want to find out more about the work at Blue Door, and you do, go to bluedoor.ca and find out about all the wonderful things that that team there is doing. I work with the best people, and you'll see why if you go to the website. Let's talk about today's podcast. We have three wonderful friends from CMHC, and man, CMHC is doing so many cool things. The announcements keep dropping on different things that they're up to, and we like to share them here because they're tools for our sector, for our community that you need to know about. I mean, today's conversation, we talk about a tool called Capital Connect, and it really is it's a matching app. And it's not that simple. You know, if it was, we would need to have a podcast. And we have three wonderful people. We have Ebony, Elle, and Jessica from CMHC come on to talk about how did this all come about? What is Capital Connect all about? Really, it's in the name, connecting people to capital. So you have investors, maybe people want to invest in affordable housing. You have developers, people who want to develop affordable housing. And we need these people. We need to connect these people. And how do you do it? You do it through this tool. And they talk all about that. They explain how this is going to help provide that capital to get those development projects built, to help our most vulnerable, to get more affordable housing built, to get some of those 5 million homes built that we need over the next few years. It's an incredible tool and a really cool conversation. They tell us all about the ins and outs, how it came about, how you can access it, who it's for, and much more. I enjoyed the conversation. All three of them were fun, informative, brilliant, and I think this tool is really going to make a difference in our sector. So let's go to that conversation now. Ebony, Jess, and Elle, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
And I'm looking forward to this podcast. We've got three wonderful, brilliant people joining us today to talk about a really cool tool. I don't want to give anything away, but before we get into talking all about that, we have to ask you the standard question we ask every time on this podcast, and that is, of course, what does home mean to you? We're going to start with Ebony, we're going to go to Jessica, and end with Elle.
Awesome. Okay. I feel like home to me at its most basic is a safe place where all the parts of day-to-day life happen. It's like where you sleep, where you gather and grow. But a lot of the time for me, it's also a feeling. And I think I feel home most viscerally as a sense of belonging and rootedness.
For me, home is a sense of stability and security. I know there's an expression, something that's like everyone needs a house, but only home can be created, something along those lines. So for me, it's a place that I've put a lot of time and energy into. It's representative of me and my sense of self. You can tell I live alone. And it's where I feel completely at ease and, comfortable.
I love that we're all going to use the word sense
in our definitions of home. It's funny, I've been talking to my sister a little bit about this lately, and just how we've started saying what's home enough. And I think it's because we've moved around a lot as kids. But so when I think about it, I think really, I think about the senses, really smells, taste, sounds, sights. What is it that drives a sense of belonging and safety? So kind of similar to these two, really, it's around those senses.
It's so fun. I don't think anyone's ever talked about senses before, and we've done this a couple hundred times. So good for you. And it's funny when you talk about home and that, so the sense of smell and what brings you back to what. My family and I, we recently just moved, and we moved into a rental where the owners had a dog that apparently peed all over the house. So that sense of smell of home,
Not
we
always
And right back for you.
we worked hard to change that sense there. But absolutely, all those little things and what you mentioned too around safety. And Jess, I love that quote you were talking about, right? It's there's Jesse Thistlecoin, the term, I think, and he's probably not the first to say it, but Fred Victor used it on a shirt, and it was, when you say it's a feeling, it's home is love. And I thought that was just simply put and put very well. We want to hear about your journey into this work, because most people, when they go around and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Do not name this sector as what they want to do or where they want to be. So we want to find out how people got interested to learn. We're going to start this time with Elle, then go to Jess, and then end with Ebony.
So yeah, classic. Mine's pretty roundabout. I started in architecture kind of way back when, and really I've always had a fascination or a love for housing. I think I mentioned we did move around a lot as kids. So I think lots of different rentals, lots of different experiences, apartments, houses, townhouses across Canada. So really, really fascinated with housing for most of my life. But started in architecture and then moved to more research focused, human-centered design, looked a lot at participatory design in architecture, which is pretty interesting to learn about. And then oddly enough, that led me to management consulting, a lot with the public sector. I don't know, all roads lead to management consulting at one point in your career. But I worked at CMHC actually as a client. So I kind of got to know the organization from that side of things. And then kind of full circle came back to bring innovation, human-centered design, everything I learned in consulting to more of a policy and kind of corporate world with housing at CMHC. And I can't understate the passion I feel for housing. Housing is a right, adequate and well-designed housing for everybody. So I feel super honored to work in this space.
For myself, early on in my career, I had ambitions to become a design researcher. And when I say design research, I mean using qualitative or mixed methods to understand the needs and behaviors of perceptions of people in order to design better products, programs, and services. So stepping into the world of design, the opportunities are really limitless in terms of being able to improve, redesign, or design new services. Similar to Elle, prior to working at CMHC, I worked at a service design consultancy where I led research for a wide range of purposes, including designing new digital apps and platforms. So there are a lot of different methods and techniques that we use in design research to solicit feedback and input from people that are either familiar with a tool or seeing it for the first time. And this is the first digital product I've worked on while at CMHC, and it's no small feat for government entities to pursue developing a platform like this. I was initially brought onto the team to lead research with affordable housing developers and investors to understand how Capital Connect fits into the development or investment processes that they have to make sure we're designing a platform that meets the needs of both groups. So applying my research skills to design and of a platform and to housing, which has been super meaningful.
Okay, round it up. I think for me, a lot of where I ended up doing the work that I'm doing really comes from my background. So I grew up in a family living in poverty. What that meant for me was I was the first person to finish high school on either side and go on to any further education. Because we're here to talk about housing. I grew up in a subsidized CMHC-backed co-op, which had like a 50-year affordability covenant, which just ended, which meant that like last year my family was evicted. So these are still things that I'm like very much in. And I think the reason I say that is I think a lot of those experiences for me of coming across like public policy programs and supports those were a really big part of how I got through life. And when I hit barriers to those were a big part of why our family struggled. And so as soon as I got to higher education and my job, I focused immediately on poverty and inequality. And the question for me was, how is it that government and other players supports design things to meet the needs of people like me? And so my career was pretty traditional, like public policy and research. And I started to realize more and more that all the tables that I were at, like people like me, the people we were serving just weren't there. And decision makers also just didn't seem to have a lot of direct experience in what those people needed or how to make things work for the way their lives were. So I pivoted from that like traditional career into more of a like Elle, a human-centered design and innovation focus. So I've worked in a bunch of weird places where the through line is that, like, how do we get to equity? How do we get to what people need? So think tanks, not-for-profits, intergovernmental bodies. I, too, did innovation and management consultancy. But the goal that I've always carried with me is to how do we bring the people that we're designing for into the center of their own process? And how do we think about things differently and with courage to really tackle like complex issues that are sticky. And I think we can all agree here that housing is a great example of a complex issue that is sticky. And with the current housing crisis calling for really bright and driven people to work on it, that's when I joined CMHC as a senior manager on the innovation team. And in my current role, along with Elle and Jess, I bring all those tools I talked about that I've gathered across my career really to support the delivery of our innovation work. And Capital Connect is one of those projects.
That's awesome. Thank you all for that and sharing your journeys. And yeah, you're so right. I mean, so often we forget to put client needs at the center of what we're doing for clients, right? That's saying nothing for us without us. And that definitely applies to this. And it's just interesting to see all your different journeys into something that you're absolutely right. I heard something yesterday. I was at something and they talked about where they're saying we don't have complex clients, we have complex systems, right? So it's the systems that really have to change to meet the client needs. I thought that was well put. Now, you mentioned, a couple of you have mentioned Capital Connect. It almost sounds like a credit card or something. Like what I could actually hear like the little singing byline.
We hope it's that smooth of an experience.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is pretty cool. I like this, but beyond that, Ebony, I'm hoping you can provide us with an intro into Capital Connect. How did it come about, and how does it work?
Okay, great. Here's my elevator pitch of what Capital Connect is all about. So let's do it in one sentence. Capital Connect, it's a digital matchmaking platform. It connects investors and developers, and the whole goal is to support the flow of private equity into affordable and mixed housing. There you go. So on the platform, affordable and mixed income housing developers can come on and they can search for investors and donors to provide very specific types of the capital that they might need to close their capital stack, get their projects realized. And vice versa, investors can also search for developers who are offering specific development opportunities that meet goals that they have, which might be their impact mandate, certain ESG criteria, regional focus, or if we're looking just at the finances, a very specific return on investment. But I would say, that really talks about like matchmaking support. I think there's also 3 other big things that the platform does to strengthen the housing ecosystem. So the first one is kind of basic. It's just diversifying funding sources, right? So Capital Connect really opens up access to different types of capital that are expanded beyond where we find affordable and mixed housing mostly reliant on, which can be sources of public funding, limited sources of public funding. And by providing those other types of capital, it allows the public funding that's there to really be focused on the most deeply affordable projects or the projects that really need it the most. So the second thing that the platform does is it supports capacity building. So we're really looking to help the not-for-profit and impact investment sectors to kind of grow their know-how in partnering and delivering affordable housing together, right? The site itself has loads of education and awareness materials on it, and we're really hoping that those continue to grow. And then, of course, last but not least, I think this is an interesting one. It's a great tool, I think, to help the housing ecosystem learn and with insights generation. So Capital Connect really helps to fill data gaps to better understand both investor and developer capital needs and identify opportunities in the market. So I don't mean that in a sort of scary way when you think about like data. We follow best practices for data ownership, privacy protections. We don't store any private data, but like any website, we can use analytics from what people do on the site and like what we learn from talking to our users. And we can really better understand investor developer barriers, needs, and help actors in the ecosystem identify potential opportunities to scale impact. So, okay, that's what it is. Your second part of your question is, how did we get here? Try and keep it quick. So this project started way back in 2020. So we're at kind of the 4-year mark. And it started from a larger exploration of innovation opportunities that could amplify value for the housing ecosystem. That's super broad, super high level. And out of that, we narrowed down just kind of 7 concepts. Capital Connect was one of those. And it was prioritized to go further. So in 2021, over like a 7-month stint, alongside Accenture, who you'll hear us talk about, they're our technology partner in like developing the site. We interviewed a bunch of investors, developers, and intermediaries to make sure that we got the barriers and their needs right, and also like how are we going to inform the design of this tool for them. So we took everything we learned from our first little phase, and we made a pilot in 2022. So we built a super simple version of Capital Connect, and the goal was to test its value live in market. So we used a really limited set of investors and developers, and we had just 4 provinces participate. And we really just wanted to learn, does this work? And if it does, like, does it work well? And I think all of us would be pretty proud to say that in just a very short 5-month run, the first pilot led to 12 successful connections. And one of those resulted in investment in a project where the developer was able to target 10% affordability across the development. So I feel like that's a big so what. And I think, you know, the so what is it kind of serves as a powerful demonstration that we can see and learn so much from models where you can create value for an investor and still generate social impact. So that core value proposition of the site. So we took all our learnings from our first pilot phase, and the goal was to improve its features, make a better user experience, increase the reach to a national level. And we recently entered into our second release with our new improved Capital Connect. So I think we're all happy to share that we kicked off this current phase at the start of the year. We just released our brand spanking new updated platform across the country in late May. So we're just hitting the ground running as we're talking to you.
Amazing. Wow, like, and I think, I mean, no doubt how it came about. People were talking about how the heck do we fund all these housing projects that need to happen, right? And I think sometimes private developers and funders they get they're given a hard time. But let's face it, I think most of the housing built across this country is privately built, right? And so how do you merge those two together, and how do you bring those together for the multiple wins that you talked about? Incredible, and I think the name says it all. Connecting people to the capital that they need. So if we look at how this fits into the big picture. And what the future looks like. You know, you've launched this. You're saying we're ready to go. Maybe Elle, you could talk about that. And who is the tool exactly for? Like, who are you targeting?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer those. I think Ebony touched a lot on what the kind of big picture pieces are that we all think about. I've been thinking about the tool. Like everyone who listens to this knows there is a massive supply gap in Canada, estimated at I think 3.5 million units needed by 2030. And I forget the exact number, but it's, you know, half or more of those need to be rental. And then we can think about how many need to be affordable. And of course, then we think, okay, there's obviously a massive capital gap as well. In particular, when we're thinking about, again, affordable housing, like just this is all kind of very well known. We all understand it. So the biggest, most obvious kind of piece here is how it fits into our bigger picture is like, can a digital platform that provides these services actually help flow private capital into more projects across Canada and actually make kind of a dent in what the capital gaps are for people? It is a big question. Like we know, everything's a digital platform these days. There's so much technology that kind of looks like this, like dating, food, whatever. There's so many, but we also know that there's extreme power in that technology. And that's why we see it everywhere. It's why we see it kind of show up in a lot of different industries and a lot of different places. And I know Jess will talk about this a bit more too, and like the kind of learnings and research, but the response we've gotten, which is why we've continued to move through these various phases, has been so positive. So I think people are looking for these outlets and ways to connect, to find this more diverse kind of potential types of financing, or find harder to get financing, kind of all different versions of that to help fill those gaps. So that's kind of how this fits into the big picture. I think future-wise, there's a couple different things. Like there's the pilot itself, which we're like, this is in a pilot stage for us for the next till the end of this year. Really, we're looking at this as the second pilot stage, and so there's just a ton of learnings. So everything Ebony talked about earlier, there's tons to document, share, build off of. There's like incredible kind of resource of seeing how do investors and developers interact across regions? Like, is this like, are there different behaviors happening when people are able to actually make these kind of connections on a platform like this? So I think there's tons and tons of learnings that we should be able to leverage and share and bring into our organization, and hopefully come onto the podcast again and share more of what our learnings are in the future. But then there's, of course, the future of the actual product and the tool itself. So the platform itself, as we've said, is it's in its pilot phase, and CMHC has always looked at this platform as really an innovation pilot, a way to research and learn and say, hey, is this needed out there in the industry? And we haven't thought about it as something that we would necessarily own, operate, and manage over a really long time. So for the next kind of phase, while we're in this pilot stage, we're also going to be looking to hand it over to an organization that can have the operation and maintenance ongoing. And really, we're thinking about an organization that we want to find an organization that's aligned with the values and the missions of Capital Connect, because we know that's really important. People are, have asked questions like, what will it look like in the future if it's not owned by CMHC? So it's something that we want to take into very kind of serious consideration around what the future of it could look like. But yeah, as I said, the role for us here was always to take on the kind of shoulder the responsibility of learning and building and testing as an innovation team in housing. We're able to do that. And then if it is successful, which so far we have seen success, then is it worth, and can we support the handoff to an organization so it has this longer term impact that we're hoping to see?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I can tell, I think there's, for nonprofits, being a nonprofit, Blue Door, where I'm from, we have, so we're in the midst of, we're taking down a little house, putting up 14 stack townhomes and so we're doing the financing pieces for it. And it is a little bit like, where do we start? How do we connect? How do we do that? This tool sounds perfect. And so my next question is to you, Jazz, is that what can people expect when they go on the platform? Like, if I'm going to go on after this and try and take a look to see maybe there's something there for this Blue Door project that we're working on, what can I expect, and what have some of those other learnings been?
For sure. So there are a lot of investment platforms and websites out there, but Capital Connect is the only platform in Canada that's dedicated exclusively to investment in affordable housing. So understanding that private investment in affordable housing is still relatively nascent, joining the platform is an opportunity to just see what's out there, what's possible in terms of investors and investees. So as a developer, whether you have experience securing private investment of different types, or if you're new to private investment and interested in seeing what the possibilities are, you can use Capital Connect to post the developments you're seeking financing for, and also to browse through and see what investors are offering. And then as an investor, whether you have experience investing in affordable housing or whether you're interested in getting started in affordable housing investment, you can come online, see potential opportunities, and familiarize yourself with the space. So Capital Connect is essentially the first step into matchmaking and connections for investors and developers specifically. You can browse through developer and investor organizational profiles and see developer projects and portfolios. So portfolios are something new we added for this launch after hearing feedback in the previous phase that developers may seek to fund multiple developments at the same time. For example, if you're renovating multiple developments or raising financing in the form of bonds or equity across multiple projects. And then based on reviewing a project portfolio or profile, you can decide if you want to connect with that organization. And if the other organization accepts that request, their contact information will be revealed. So after that point, any conversations about financing will happen off the platform. So the first step to getting on Capital Connect is requesting access. If you go to capital-connect.ca, you'll see the request access at the top right of your window. You fill out that form, select whether you'd like to join as a developer or investor, and we review each request that we receive. The first time you come online, you'll be prompted to create a profile. Then if you're a developer, you'll be prompted to post a project or portfolio of projects, depending on what works best for your organization. There are already quite a few people that joined last phase and people that have signed up in this phase since the recent launch. So platforms like this work best when there are many people that come online. So if it sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to join, see what's there. And then in terms of the second part of your question, in terms of learnings, we learned a lot last phase directly from developers and investors. We led over 30 interviews to solicit feedback about the platform, had people click through the screens, show us what they liked, what they didn't like, and heard people's impressions about different features. Based on all of that feedback, we have completely revamped the site with new features and improved user experience. And a few unique things that we're trying out this time is an approach to affordability badges, which are assigned based on the affordability levels of your project. We also added an approach to impact criteria and indicators that Ebony mentioned, using ESG, so environmental social governance frameworks, which was alongside the researchers at CMHC. And we also improved how developers visually display the different types of capital and the amounts that they are seeking. So if you were on the site last phase, you'll be able to see exactly how your feedback was incorporated, which is something I'm always proud of. But yeah, there's lots of learnings that we took, and then a lot of improvements we made from those learnings.
I forgot to go into who the platform is for, so I'd be happy to build off of that from what Jess said.
Absolutely.
A critical,
for sure.
if you're interested and you want to request access, well, who are you? And you know what? It is extra important for the housing industry to talk through this one because there are so many players in the housing ecosystem that are critical to driving forward a project. But this platform, it does have a specific audience in mind. So I think it is important for us to talk a little bit about who the audience is so that people can hear themselves in it. Really, there's two. So we keep hearing developers and investors. So our key kind of folks that we imagine, or organizations we imagine going on, are developers who focus on affordable or mixed income housing projects. And that's grown a little bit since our last phase. And then two are the investors who have capacity to provide capital and an interest or a mandate that is focused on affordable housing. So really thinking about the kind of values aligned, mission aligned organizations that I think help with the matching. One of the things we had heard in our second round of research was about kind of knowing off the bat that organization might have the same goals as you. It means you're like through the first, you're through your first date. You're like, okay, I know that we're aligned in a way that's going to at least allow us to lead to our next conversation. And then we do actually think, the type of developers we have on there right now, which is how we've loosely defined developers, are nonprofit housing developers, charitable and faith-based organizations, social enterprises, and then again, for-profit developers who do have a focus on mixed income. And then on the investor side, some of the kind of types of investors we imagine are private foundations, philanthropic foundations or charities. Potentially, we've seen some credit unions on there, and then corporate investors or family offices who, again, have more of a kind of social-driven mandate. And I will say this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list. There could be people that we're missing that do fit into those categories. But why it matters is because we know there's more roles than that. One of the main things we hear people kind of ask us is there's a lot of groups out there that we would classify as intermediaries. And so they're playing a really critical role in helping people, whether it's building capacity or doing kind of consulting work on behalf of a nonprofit who's looking for a certain type of support. But when you do come on, you have to identify as either an investor or a developer. So if you think of yourself more as an intermediary, are you representing an investor or a developer? And as long as you can kind of put yourself into one of those relatively binary categories, at least for this phase of work, which was a consideration that we had when it came to the design of the platform, that's just one of the important pieces of joining and participating on the platform.
No, and that's helpful too. I think of many nonprofits that have brought on, say, consultants to help them through. Like in our case, we have Elle Community Builders, and so they would be signing on to this on the development side to say, okay, we're doing this. So it makes total sense, and thank you for that. And Elle, you're right. There's a lot of tools out there. There's lots going on. What do you, if you had to sum up, like, what is the real value add of Capital Connect?
I mean, I don't know how, we probably just say this over and over again, like clearest and first and foremost is the funding. We know the barriers to development are huge. Funding is perhaps the biggest, especially when it comes to affordable housing. So when we think about a value add, can this tool just help fill the gaps for organizations in their current capital stacks? That's kind of number one, and probably hopefully the most clear with the name. We'd like to be a very clear value prop when it comes to that. I think if we think more into the future, there's a lot of different potentials that a platform like this could offer. Ebony touched on capacity. So is it, how can we kind of help both developers as well as investors build more capacity, both through the materials that are on there, as well as building awareness, potentially creating more partnerships, seeing what type of opportunities are across different regions with different groups. So there's that capacity piece. And I think too, if we continue kind of moving out, there is an important piece around the role that private capital can play. So can we create a system where the reliance on government funding starts looking a little bit different, where there's just a different relationship between how private and public capital can support towards one goal? And I think that's can be more of a complex or sticky topic, but it's so critical when we think about how we produce housing, in particular affordable housing in the space that we exist right now in Canada. And I guess there's a sort of an exponential type of way this can grow and continue adding value as we like think about what the future state of it is. When we first envisioned this, people would use the term one-stop shop. Can we make this a place, which is always used in digital platforms, but can we make this a place where you kind of have all the inputs to housing land in one spot? So labor, finance, land, capacity, whatever your kind of other pieces are that you need. That's probably not like on the table to start, but when we do think about what the potential for something like this holds, again, really depending on where it lands and what the learnings are as we move through this. Like in true innovation fashion, we're still, a baby. We're still pretty early on, hyper focused on that first goal that I talked about, but want to be able to learn and iterate and build it into something that can continue to grow and add value to the industry.
And maybe if I can, I think that it maybe is just a takeaway in general when we think about the fact that the current housing crisis just does call for innovation and does call for just completely breaking and testing new models to figure out how we crack some of these nuts. And some of the things Elle was talking about, like the idea of Capital Connect hosting land or labor or whatever, these were things that were mapped out in what we sort of think about as horizons when you think of a solution, right? When you're at the design process. But I think it's really important, and I want to share it as almost an encouragement for all those folks out there in the ecosystem, is how do you break a big solution down into its simplest part and start there? Something that you can fund, something that you can do, test it, try it, break it, make it, and then whatever works, like keep going and building from there. So I like Elle's answer a lot because I think it kind of provides that like nice little key to maybe how we can do things differently together in small ways to lead to something that over time could have really outsized impact.
Now, there's no doubt in my mind, this is brilliant, and there should be people will take you up on this. I think it's really going to soar, and you'll tweak it as you go along and add and change and do that kind of thing. It is incredible. Ebony, if people now just touch on it a little bit, if people want to check this out, they want to find out more information, they want either an investor or a developer wants to get on board, how can they do that?
I feel like I should have got like a nice little sales fedora to wear for this part. I see a little mute symbol above my head. I don't know if that's what will show up on YouTube, but I feel like that could be my little sales hat if I just go like this. But yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. So if you're an investor and you want to invest in affordable mixed housing projects, or you're a developer with housing projects seeking capital or equity, like Jess said earlier, just go to the website. So that address again for listeners is capital-connect.ca. You click a request to access button and we'll work with you. Our team will work with you to get registered. The other part that I would say is if you want to learn more or you have questions, because you probably will, just reach out to our team. Find us on LinkedIn. I didn't put my last name here. I also didn't know that would show up under my image. But you can search for any one of us. We're very friendly people. On LinkedIn, if you're a client of CMHC and you have a rep where we work, you can always reach out to them and get them to connect you to us. And we got loads of stuff. Like we have an FAQ document all prepped and ready to go. We've got recorded info sessions and just a ton of other resources. So honestly, reach out.
You just go to the loads of stuff page. And,
yeah, exactly. Make it really easy.
Yeah.
Loads of stuff.
I love that. Well, listen, I can't wait to see how this plays out. I think it's wonderful, and we're up and running now, right? Like this is as we drop this podcast, ready to go and see, and eager to have you all back to talk about what's happening with the tool in the near future. So thank you so much for all your work on this, for being innovative, for thinking differently, and trying, to bring solutions to the table. It's so appreciated and so needed, and I'm grateful for your time today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye for now.